A merciless winter wrapped Denver in blinding white as an accused Navy SEAL moved through the frozen streets with his German Shepherd at his side. One mistake away from losing everything, he was already running out of places to hide. Then the dog stopped, staring at an abandoned rail yard buried in snow. Beneath the ice and concrete lay something impossible, a hidden underground bunker, sealed long ago, waiting for him. What pulling that door open would reveal wasn't safety, but a truth powerful enough to start a war. Evidence of betrayal, a mission left unfinished, enemies who would kill to keep the past buried. Walking away could have saved his life. Staying would cost him everything. He chose neither fear nor escape. He chose duty. What he didn't know was this: the choice he made that night would expose a conspiracy and force him to face the men who destroyed his team. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if stories of loyalty, courage, and second chances move you, please subscribe for more. Winter in Denver did not announce itself gently. It arrived like a verdict. The sky was a hard, merciless blue, the kind that made the cold feel sharper, brighter, and somehow more personal. Snow lined the streets in uneven banks, scraped and refrozen into glassy ridges by passing cars and indifferent plows. Sunlight reflected off the ice so fiercely it hurt the eyes, turning sidewalks into blinding corridors of white. The city looked alive, busy, almost cheerful. But that brightness was a lie. The cold crept into bones, into thoughts, into the quiet places people tried not to look at too closely. Ethan Carter moved through that brightness like a man already halfway erased. He was tall, just over 6 feet, with the posture of someone trained never to waste motion. The Navy working uniform he wore, digital camouflage uninterrupted across jacket pockets and seams, looked out of place among winter coats and wool scarves. The fabric was worn but meticulously maintained, every crease intentional. His face was angular, carved by years of discipline and deprivation. A dark stubble shadowed his jaw, not careless, just neglected. His nose had been broken once, maybe twice, and healed slightly off-center. His eyes were a cold gray blue, alert by instinct even when exhaustion dulled everything else. People tended to look away from him, not because he was threatening, but because he looked like a man carrying a story no one wanted to hear. Ethan had learned silence the hard way. After leaving the teams, after the mission that had gone wrong in ways reports could never capture, silence became a kind of armor. It kept questions at bay. It kept memories contained. But silence didn't stop envelopes. The eviction notice sat folded inside his jacket pocket, its sharp edges pressing against his ribs with every step. He hadn't needed to read it again. He knew every word by heart. Final notice: failure to comply, vacate within 14 days. 14 days felt generous on paper. In reality, it was a countdown. His cheap rental room sat above a closed laundromat 3 blocks away. The heat barely worked. The walls were thin, but it was a place where no one asked questions, and that had been enough until it wasn't. Ethan turned down a side street, boots crunching softly against packed snow. The sounds of the city faded, replaced by the distant hum of traffic and the hollow echo of wind moving between buildings. That was when he felt it. Not a sound, not a movement, a presence. He stopped. Across the street, beneath a flickering amber streetlight, stood a dog. It was a German Shepherd, large and powerfully built, its thick winter coat absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. The dog's coloring was striking, a dark sable body with a deep black overlay, the black heavy across its back and neck like a mantle, fading into rich brown along the ribs, with tan legs and belly dusted faintly with snow. The fur was dense, natural, matte, no sheen, no silver, no gray. This was a working coat, built for endurance, not show. The dog did not bark. It did not wag its tail. It simply stood there, perfectly still, amber eyes locked onto Ethan's face with unnerving focus. Not the pleading look of a stray, not the distracted curiosity of a city dog. This was a measuring gaze, calm, evaluating, almost respectful. Ethan's instincts stirred, old and unwelcome. He scanned the street automatically, checking reflections in windows, listening for footsteps. Nothing. Just him, the dog, and the cold. "Well," he muttered under his breath, voice rough from disuse, "that makes 2 of us who don't belong here." The dog turned and walked away, not hurried, not hesitant, just confident, deliberate steps down the sidewalk. After a few paces, it stopped and looked back. Waiting. Ethan let out a short, humorless breath. "You've got the wrong guy," he said, though the dog made no sign of hearing him. "I don't follow strangers, especially the four-legged kind." The dog blinked once, then continued. Something tightened in Ethan's chest. Against reason, against training, he followed. They moved through narrow side streets where sunlight bounced off frozen puddles like broken mirrors. The dog led him past a closed diner, then into an alley where the snow lay thin and slick, polished by shadow. Ethan nearly slipped once, catching himself with the reflexes of muscle memory that never truly faded. The alley opened onto an abandoned industrial strip near an old rail line. Rusted fences leaned at tired angles. A row of warehouse buildings squatted beside the tracks, their windows dark, brick faces scarred by decades of neglect. Snow had drifted high against the walls, smoothing sharp edges, disguising decay. The dog slowed. Ethan stopped again, unease prickling along his spine. This was not a place people wandered into by accident. "You know," he said quietly, more to himself than the dog, "most men hit rock bottom without needing a canine tour guide." The dog ignored the comment. It walked toward a patch of snow near the rail yard's edge, where an old iron utility cover lay partially buried. Time had eaten away at its markings. To Ethan's eyes, it was just another forgotten piece of the city's underbelly. The dog raised one paw. Then it pressed down, precisely, decisively, on a specific spot. There was a sharp metallic click. Ethan froze. The sound cut cleanly through the winter air, too crisp, too mechanical to be coincidence. Beneath the snow, a thin seam of light appeared, no wider than a knife blade, glowing pale gold against the white. Ethan's breath fogged in front of him as the ground beneath his boots vibrated, just slightly, like something enormous had shifted far below. He stared at the light, then at the dog. The German shepherd met his gaze calmly, as if to say, "You're late." And somewhere deep under Denver's frozen streets, something old and patient had just awakened. The iron cover continued to descend with a controlled, almost respectful slowness, disappearing into the concrete as if the city itself were swallowing its own secret. Warm air rose to meet Ethan's face, dry and clean, carrying the unmistakable scent of filtered circulation and old metal. It was not the rot of sewers or the damp breath of underground decay. This was engineered air. Purpose-built. Military. Ethan stood at the edge of the opening, snow swirling around his boots, sunlight flashing off the rim of the shaft like a warning flare. Every instinct he had screamed at him to step back. Unknown access point, no intel, no exfil plan, no overwatch. The rules he had lived by. For most of his adult life lined up in his head like red tape stretched across a minefield. And yet, his body leaned forward. 7 years earlier, a hesitation like this had cost him men. Good men. Men who trusted him to move when movement mattered. Since then, fear had worn 1,000 disguises, but he knew its shape now. He exhaled, slow and deliberate, and swung his legs over the edge. The ladder welded into the shaft wall was solid, cold under his gloves. Each rung took his weight without complaint as he descended. The noise of the city faded above him, replaced by a deep, low hum that vibrated faintly through the metal. When his boots touched the floor, the hatch above sealed shut with a soft hydraulic sigh, cutting off daylight completely. For half a second, there was darkness. Then the lights came on. Not flickering fluorescents or emergency strips, but full-spectrum panels recessed into the ceiling, washing the corridor in a steady, sterile white. The space around him resolved into sharp detail, smooth, reinforced walls, seams nearly invisible, the floor a matte composite designed to absorb sound. His Navy working uniform, digital camouflage uninterrupted across every panel and pocket, reflected faintly in the polished surfaces, making him look like a ghost from an operation that never officially happened. The German shepherd was already moving. The dog's paws made no sound on the floor as it trotted ahead, posture confident, head level. Up close, Ethan could see the age in it now, not weakness, but experience. The muzzle showed the faintest frosting of lighter hairs beneath the black overlay, the scars along one flank subtle but unmistakable. This dog had lived a life that included pain and training in equal measure. Its amber eyes never stopped scanning, not anxious, just thorough. "You've been here before," Ethan murmured. The dog didn't look back, but its ears twitched, acknowledging the truth without ceremony. They reached a junction where the corridor widened into a small antechamber. A control panel stood embedded in the wall, its surface dulled by a thin layer of dust that spoke of years, not days. The dog stopped in front of it and lowered its head. Its ears dipped briefly, almost ceremonially. Then it turned and fixed Ethan with a look that carried an unsettling weight. Expectation. Ethan stepped closer and brushed dust away with the edge of his sleeve. The panel was military standard, older generation but impeccably maintained. No obvious keypad, no biometric scanner, just a recessed plate and a narrow status strip beneath it. That was when he noticed the collar. Up close, there was no mistaking it. Olive drab paracord, woven thick and tight into a complex cobra pattern, not decorative, functional. A style passed between soldiers in stolen moments overseas, fingers busy to keep minds from breaking. Ethan had tied one like it once, years ago, hands shaking with adrenaline while someone laughed beside him to keep things light. His throat tightened. "Only one team I know used that knot," he said quietly. The dog finally looked away, gaze settling on the control panel as if that answer belonged to the past. Ethan straightened, the weight of the moment settling onto his shoulders. He had walked away from the military, but the military had never quite walked away from him. He placed his hand on the recessed plate. It warmed beneath his palm. The hum deepened, resonating through the soles of his boots. Somewhere beyond the walls, systems awakened, relays closing, circuits carrying current for the first time in years. The panel slid aside soundlessly, revealing a broader corridor beyond, and at the same time, the status strip beneath it flickered to life. A monitor at the far end of the chamber illuminated, its black surface blooming into lines of pale green text. Protocol, Wake. Primary systems, online user identification, Ethan Carter. Ethan stared at the screen. His name looked wrong there, too deliberate, too certain. He had spent years trying to disappear into paperwork gaps and cheap rentals. And here it was, etched into a machine that should not have known he existed anymore. "Either I'm losing my mind," he said, voice low, steady by habit, "or someone built this place, expecting me." The dog sat beside him, tail still, eyes on the screen. There was no triumph in its posture, no relief. Just patience, the kind that came from carrying a burden long enough to accept its weight. The corridor beyond the antechamber opened into a larger space, partially visible now that the lights had come fully online. Ethan could see the outlines of equipment racks, a recessed bunk folded neatly into one wall, a compact kitchenette with stainless steel surfaces untouched by rust. Everything was clean, preserved, waiting. Whoever had designed this place hadn't done it to hide. They had done it to endure. Ethan took a cautious step forward, then another. His senses cataloged details automatically. Airflow steady, temperature controlled, no immediate signs of forced entry or recent use. This was not a bunker thrown together by a paranoid survivalist. This was infrastructure. He felt the past stirring, memories surfacing unbidden. Long nights under foreign stars. Briefings whispered in half-lit rooms. Trust built on nothing but competence and the understanding that everyone present was willing to die if necessary. The screen chimed softly, drawing his attention back. Secondary systems stand by awaiting command. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had never liked being the man with the final say. Responsibility sat heavier than armor. But standing there, beneath the city, with a dog wearing a soldier's knot and a machine calling him by name, he understood something with cold clarity. This was not an invitation. It was a summons. He looked down at the German shepherd. Up close, the dog's eyes held something deeper than intelligence. There was resolve there, old and weathered, like a veteran who had outlived the war but not the mission. "All right," Ethan said finally. "You brought me here. Now we see what's been waiting." The dog rose smoothly to its feet and moved deeper into the facility, not hurried, not hesitant. Ethan followed. The door, behind them, sealing shut with a final decisive hiss. Somewhere above, Denver's streets glittered in the winter sun, unaware that beneath the snow and concrete, a long dormant machine had recognized its operator at last. The deeper Ethan moved into the underground facility, the more the silence changed. It was no longer the empty quiet of abandonment, but the controlled hush of a place designed to listen more than it spoke. Every sound, his boots, his breath, the faint padding of the German shepherd's paws, felt measured, absorbed by walls that had been built to survive secrets. The main chamber opened gradually, revealed by the widening arc of light panels overhead. It was circular, compact, and unmistakably military. A recessed bunk folded neatly into one wall, its gray blanket pulled taut with surgical precision. Across from it sat a stainless steel kitchenette, unused but stocked, every surface wiped clean as if someone had expected inspection at any moment. To the left, a compact medical bay held sealed trauma kits, labeled in block lettering, dates checked and rechecked. No clutter, no personalization. Whoever had built this place had believed discipline was a form of prayer. Ethan recognized that belief. "This isn't a hideout," he murmured. "It's a station." The German shepherd paused near the center of the room, standing tall despite his age. Up close, Ethan could see the stiffness in the dog's joints when it shifted its weight, the way one hind leg favored the other just slightly. 10 years old, maybe more, a veteran in fur. The dog's ears remained alert, but his eyes carried something heavier now, relief perhaps, that the path had finally ended here. Ethan moved to the workstation embedded into the far wall. A semicircle of dark monitors curved around a single reinforced chair bolted to the floor. The chair's padding was worn in precise places, shaped by years of use from the same body, the same posture. Ethan's stomach tightened as he recognized it. "Leo," he said quietly. He didn't need proof yet. He felt it in the geometry of the room, in the way everything had been arranged to maximize efficiency and minimize waste. Leo Grant had always been like that. Where Ethan had been instinct and action, Leo had been structure and foresight. The planner, the man who saw 3 moves ahead and still carried the guilt of the 4th. Ethan lowered himself into the chair. It fit him too well. The central monitor flickered when he touched the keyboard. Lines of error messages cascaded down the screen, corrupted directories, missing indices, fragmented partitions. A lesser man might have taken that as a dead end. Ethan leaned forward instead, elbows on knees, eyes sharpening. "All right," he said softly. "Let's dig." He worked methodically, fingers moving with a confidence that surprised him. Years had passed since he'd touched anything more complex than a phone, but the training never really left. Signals intelligence had been a secondary specialty in his early SEAL days, a skill he'd used only when things went wrong. He bypassed the operating system entirely, dropping into raw data access, pulling fragments, like bones from sediment. The German shepherd lay down at his feet, head resting on crossed paws, eyes never leaving Ethan's hands. He watched the work the way a guard watched a door. Video files emerged first, short, grainy clips with no sound, men in unmarked uniforms exchanging briefcases in dim rooms, faces partially obscured. Locations tagged only by coordinates Ethan recognized too easily, places his team had bled. Audio logs followed, distorted but legible in pieces. Leo's voice cut through the static in one of them, strained but unmistakable. "The intel discrepancies aren't random," he said. "They align too cleanly. Someone is feeding us bad data, I'm sure of it." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered that voice like a scar remembered pain. Then he saw it. A single directory, buried beneath layers of encryption and redundancy. Its name sat alone, stark and deliberate. Valhalla. Ethan didn't touch it right away. He stared at the word, feeling the weight of it pressed down on him. Leo had loved names like that. Dark humor, myth sharpened into code. Valhalla was where warriors went after death, a place earned, not given. "What did you leave me, brother?" Ethan whispered. He initiated the file preview instead. A warning populated the screen in sterile font. "Accessing this directory may trigger external monitoring protocols. Proceed with caution." Ethan exhaled through his nose. "That sounds like you." He glanced down at the dog. "You knew about this, didn't you?" The German shepherd lifted his head slightly. One amber eye caught the light, steady and unblinking. Ethan selected a subfile. The screen went black. Then Leo Grant appeared. He was sitting in this same chair, shoulders hunched forward, forearms resting on his thighs. He looked thinner than Ethan remembered, face gaunt, dark circles carved deep beneath his eyes. His hair, once kept regulation short, had grown out unevenly, curling at the edges as if he'd stopped caring. But his eyes were sharp, focused, burning with the kind of intensity that came only when Leo had committed fully to something dangerous. "If you're seeing this," Leo said, voice low but controlled, "then the contingency worked, and that means I didn't make it." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I'm not going to waste time explaining how bad this is," Leo continued. "You already know. The contractor, Apex, has been selling selective intel to prolong operations. More missions, more contracts, more dead Americans. I traced the money, the comms, the patterns. It's all here, locked behind Valhalla." Leo leaned back, rubbing his face with both hands. For a moment, the mask slipped. Exhaustion bled through. "I tried to take it up the chain," he said. "You can guess how that went, so I did what I always do. I planned." The camera angle shifted slightly, just enough for Ethan to see the dog lying at Leo's feet. Younger then. Stronger. The same dark, sable coat, the same black mantle across the back, the same eyes. "You're probably wondering why a dog," Leo said, and something like a sad smile touched his lips. "Because people get compromised. Dogs don't. He knows the triggers, the paths, the locks. He's my fail-safe, my living key." Ethan felt his throat tighten painfully. "If you're here, it means you followed him," Leo went on. "Good. That means you're still you, and it means you can finish this." Leo leaned closer to the camera, voice dropping. "But understand this. The moment you open Valhalla fully, they'll know. They're watching for it. They always have been. This place will buy you time, not safety." He paused, eyes flicking down to the dog again. His hand rested briefly on the animal's head. "Take care of him," Leo said. "He'll take care of you. That's the deal." The video cut to black. For a long moment, Ethan didn't move. The hum of the facility seemed louder now, the silence heavier. The German shepherd rose slowly and stepped closer, placing his head against Ethan's knee. The weight was solid, grounding. Ethan swallowed hard. The grief he had buried for years stirred, not sharp like before, but dense, reshaping itself into something else. Understanding, anger, purpose. A chime sounded overhead. The facility's AI voice cut through the room, calm and precise, unmistakably female. "Alert. Unidentified aerial device detected above Sector D." Ethan's head snapped up. One of the auxiliary monitors flared to life, displaying a simplified map of the surrounding area. A single red dot moved in a slow, deliberate circle above the warehouse district. "Drone," Ethan muttered. The dog's ears pricked forward, body tensing, every line of him suddenly alert. Ethan looked from the screen to Valhalla's locked directory, then back to the red dot circling patiently above them. "They found the whisper," he said quietly, and somewhere above the snow-bright streets of Denver, the hunt had begun. The drone moved with predatory patience, its shadow sliding across the snow like a thought that refused to go away. On the camouflaged camera feed, the abandoned warehouse roofs gleamed under winter sun, every ridge of ice reflecting light so brightly it felt unreal, daylight weaponized. The drone flew low, slow, methodical, its dark body stark against the white cityscape. It wasn't searching randomly, it was confirming. Ethan stood at the edge of the command console, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on the screen. The faint hum of the bunker deepened as subsystems awakened in response to the threat above. He could feel it through the soles of his boots, a vibration like a held breath. "Too clean," he muttered. "You didn't just stumble onto us." He reached for the jammer controls, fingers moving quickly, confidence returning with muscle memory. The interface resisted him immediately. Grayed out, permissions denied, command paths sealed behind layers of security that weren't his. Leo again, always 3 locks past necessity. "Of course you locked it," Ethan said, not without a trace of affection. "You never trusted anyone completely." The German shepherd had already moved. He crossed the room with quiet certainty, his dark sable coat rippling over powerful shoulders as he went. Under the bright white lights, the black overlay across his back looked almost armored. He stopped beside a section of wall that appeared no different from the rest, smooth, unmarked, unassuming. For a brief moment, he pressed his forehead against it, as if listening. Then he struck. Not hard. Precise. His shoulder nudged a seam no human eye would have noticed. The wall responded instantly, a soft hydraulic whisper revealing a concealed panel that flared to life in cool blue light. A tactical interface bloomed across the main monitor, overlays stacking over the city map. Ethan's eyebrows rose despite himself. Guess that answers who Leo trusted. He didn't waste the opening. Fingers flew. He rerouted power, overrode a safety throttle, and brought the jammer online. A low-frequency surge rippled outward, invisible but absolute. On the camera feed, the drone wobbled, corrected, then began to drift. Its signal icon flickered red. "Got you," Ethan said quietly. The drone's feed cut to static. For exactly 3 seconds, the bunker felt like it exhaled. Then the map updated. 8 red markers appeared at the perimeter, spaced with professional discipline, advancing from multiple angles toward the warehouse district. Their movement wasn't hurried. It was confident, coordinated, efficient. Ethan recognized the pattern immediately. Bounding overwatch, staggered approach, textbook containment, a cleanup team. 8, he counted under his breath. At least it's not a platoon. Snow gods still have a sense of humor. He rolled his shoulders, loosening tension that had already begun to coil there. Humor was on a habit, a reflex he used when fear tried to climb into his throat. It didn't fool him, but it steadied his hands. The German shepherd stood beside him now, body aligned with Ethan's, gaze locked on the advancing markers. The dog's posture had changed. Gone was the calm patience of a guide. This was readiness, purpose, the stance of a creature that had faced violence before and understood its language. "They're not cops," Ethan said. "No sirens, no radios lighting up the spectrum. That means private." He zoomed the feed, switching to ground-level cameras hidden among debris and structural cracks Leo had apparently thought of years in advance. One by one, the figures resolved. They wore black winter tactical gear, layered and modular, built for cold-weather operations. Faces obscured by balaclavas and goggles, only eyes visible, hard, scanning, alert. Their movements were economical, stripped of wasted motion. These were men shaped by training and paid to forget. Hesitation. One of them paused and raised a clenched fist. The others froze instantly. The leader stepped forward, taller than the rest, shoulders broad beneath his gear. Even through layers of fabric and armor, Ethan could read him. Late 40s, maybe early 50s, posture rigid from years of command, the kind of man whose authority had calcified into habit. "Whoever you are," Ethan said softly to the screen, "you didn't come for coffee." The leader gestured again. 2 men broke off and returned to a vehicle parked just outside the camera's range. When they came back, they carried equipment that made Ethan's stomach tighten. Ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors, the tools of patience. "They're going to peel the city back layer by layer," Ethan said. "No rush, no noise, just math." The German shepherd let out a low sound, not a growl, but something deeper. Recognition. Ethan glanced down at him. "Yeah, I see it too." The enemy team began. Deploying the equipment with clinical precision, the GPR unit rolled forward on rubberized wheels, its antenna array sweeping the ground in slow arcs. Another pair knelt to drive seismic spikes into the frozen earth, mallets rising and falling in steady rhythm. Each strike sent a dull vibration through the ground, through the bunker floor. Ethan felt it, a faint tremor beneath his boots, barely perceptible but unmistakable. The hunters weren't guessing anymore. They were listening. He moved quickly now, scanning the tactical interface for options. Defensive systems existed. Leo had hinted as much, but they were buried behind layers of authorization Ethan hadn't cracked yet. He could hold them off electronically for a while, blind them, deafen them, but technology always lost to persistence. "They don't need to see us," Ethan said. "They just need to know we're here." The German shepherd turned his head slightly, amber eyes meeting Ethan's. There was no fear inside them, only trust. Ethan felt something settle inside his chest, heavy and steady. He had spent years drifting, avoiding connection, convincing himself solitude was safer. Standing there now, underground, with a dog who had crossed the city to find him, and a dead friend's legacy humming in the walls, he understood how wrong he had been. "All right," he said. "If they want to dig, we make it expensive." He pulled up the subsurface schematics, studying the layers of earth, concrete, and forgotten infrastructure above them. Old utility tunnels, abandoned conduits, structural weaknesses Leo had clearly mapped and cataloged. There were ways to confuse readings, to create noise where there should be silence, but every option came with risk. Another tremor ran through the floor, stronger this time. On the monitor, the leader straightened, one gloved hand resting on the GPR console. Even through grainy resolution, Ethan could sense his satisfaction. The machine was telling them something interesting. "They've caught the scent," Ethan said, "and they don't let go." The German shepherd stepped forward and placed a paw lightly on Ethan's boot. The contact was brief, grounding. A reminder. Ethan inhaled slowly, centering himself the way he used to before breaching a door. Fear receded, replaced by focus. The city above might have forgotten him, but down here, beneath layers of snow and concrete, the rules were simpler: adapt or be buried. He looked back to the screen, watching the hunters settle into their work, methodical and relentless. "You wanted Valhalla, Leo," he murmured. "Looks like we're going to earn it." Above them, the sun blazed against the snow, bright and indifferent. Below, the earth listened as men and machines prepared to tear secrets from its depths, and the ghost they hunted was very much awake. The first seismic pulse rolled through the bunker like a knuckle rapped against a coffin lid. It wasn't loud, not exactly, more a pressure than a sound, felt through the soles of Ethan's boots and the bones of his ankles. He stood still, eyes half closed, counting the interval between pulses. The rhythm was deliberate, methodical. Whoever was running the equipment above knew exactly what they were doing. "If they map us," Ethan said quietly, "we're done." He turned from the main console, already moving. Staying put meant letting the enemy reduce the underground to equations and anomalies. GPR and seismic data didn't care about heroics or patience. They cared about voids, about things that didn't belong. And this bunker, no matter how well hidden, was a scar beneath the city. The German shepherd was already at his side. The dog's breathing was steady, controlled, his dark sable coat catching the emergency lights in muted patterns of brown and black. Up close, Ethan noticed the scar tissue beneath the fur along the dog's ribcage, old injuries, healed cleanly. This was not an animal unfamiliar with pain. This was a survivor. "All right," Ethan said, crouching to the dog's level. "You lead. I'll keep up." The dog didn't hesitate. He turned and padded toward a narrower corridor, branching off the main chamber, one Ethan hadn't explored yet. The passage sloped downward, the ceiling lowering just enough to force Ethan to duck slightly. The walls here were rougher, less refined, concrete poured decades earlier and reinforced later with steel ribs. Emergency lights flickered on as they passed, bathing everything in a pale amber glow. The air changed as they descended. It grew colder, heavier with moisture, carrying the faint mineral scent of deep earth. The hum of the bunker's systems faded, replaced by the distant sound of moving water. The tunnel ended abruptly at a reinforced bulkhead door. The German shepherd stopped, sniffed at the seam, then pressed his shoulder against a recessed panel. The door unlocked with a soft clack and slid open just enough to reveal darkness beyond. Water. A subterranean river flowed through the opening, slow but powerful, its surface black and glossy like oil under the emergency lights. It wasn't deep enough to swim, but it was cold, meltwater fed by runoff and snowmelt from above, channeled through forgotten infrastructure older than the city itself. Ethan exhaled through his nose. "Of course you planned this too," he murmured, thinking of Leo. Moving water disrupted seismic readings, a blind spot in the enemy's tools. He stepped into the river. The cold bit instantly, a sharp burning shock that clawed up his calves and thighs. His breath hitched, but training kicked in. He moved steadily, boots finding purchase on slick stone, rifle held high and dry. The German shepherd waited beside him, water parting around his chest, muscles working smoothly beneath. Thick fur. The dog didn't flinch. He had crossed worse. The river led them beneath a low arch and then angled upward. Ethan followed, teeth clenched as numbness crept into his legs. After what felt like an eternity but was likely less than a minute, the passage opened into a small concrete chamber half collapsed by age and neglect. Cracks spiderwebbed across one wall, daylight filtering through thin seams where snow had packed and refrozen. Ethan braced himself against the wall and listened. Above him, faint but unmistakable, came voices, muffled through layers of concrete and earth, but close, too close. He peered through one of the cracks. The warehouse district lay just beyond, bright under the winter sun. Snow reflected light so intensely it flattened shadows, turning everything stark and exposed. About 60 yards away, the enemy team had established a temporary command point. The GPR unit sat idle now, cables running back to a compact generator humming steadily at the edge of the lot. Men moved around it with practiced efficiency, adjusting equipment, checking readings, confident in their progress. Ethan's eyes locked onto the generator, heart of the operation. He settled into position, sliding the rifle's stock into his shoulder, elbows braced against concrete. The scope came up smoothly, the world narrowing to a single frame. Through the glass, he could see frost clinging to the generator's casing, the faint shimmer of heat distortion rising from its exhaust. The German shepherd stood just behind him, alert but silent, ears rotating independently as he tracked movement outside. The dog was older, but his focus was absolute, a sentinel. Ethan adjusted for distance, for wind, minimal at ground level, but present. He slowed his breathing, letting the chaos above and the cold below fade into background noise. This was familiar territory. This was where his mind worked best. He squeezed the trigger. The suppressed shot was little more than a dull cough, swallowed instantly by the open space and the city's ambient noise. The round struck the generator's casing dead center. Sparks erupted, brief and violent, followed by a metallic whine as the engine seized and died. The effect was immediate. Lights on the GPR unit flickered and went dark. One of the men cursed, his voice carrying faintly even through concrete. Another dropped to a knee, inspecting the dead generator with disbelief. Confusion rippled through the group like a disturbed nest. Ethan was already moving. He pulled back from the crack and retreated into the tunnel, boots splashing softly as he re-entered the Black River. He moved upstream this time, keeping low, letting the water erase any trace he might leave behind. The German shepherd followed without prompting, water streaming from his coat as he climbed the opposite bank. They emerged into a different chamber, this one narrower and reinforced with rusted steel beams. Ethan climbed a short ladder, bolted into the wall, and eased open a rusted grate just enough to slip through. He found himself behind a line of derelict storage containers, well outside the enemy's immediate focus. From here, he watched them scramble. Without power, the GPR was useless. The seismic sensors still functioned, but without correlated data, their picture was incomplete. The leader barked orders, sharp and controlled, but there was an edge to his movements now. Irritation, surprise. Ethan allowed himself a thin smile. "You don't like surprises," he whispered. He didn't fire again, not yet. The goal wasn't to kill, it was to unbalance, to remind them this wasn't a dig site, it was a contested space. He moved again, circling wide, using the maze of containers and broken fencing to stay concealed. The city noises masked his repositioning. Distant traffic, a passing train horn, the crunch of snow under careless boots that weren't his. From a new angle, he lined up another shot. This time at a junction box feeding auxiliary equipment. One round, clean and precise. Sparks, darkness, another layer of confusion. The German shepherd stayed close, matching Ethan's pace, his presence grounding. The dog's age showed now in the careful way he navigated debris, but there was no hesitation, no lag. Loyalty like this didn't fade with time. It deepened. Ethan slipped back into cover, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the sharp clarity that had been missing from his life for years. This wasn't hiding. This was engagement. Then he heard it. A voice crackled through one of the enemy's handheld radios, picked up faintly by a nearby camera feed he'd left active in the bunker. Calm, certain, almost pleased. "He's here." Ethan froze. The words weren't shouted. They weren't panicked. They carried the weight of confirmation, not suspicion. Whoever spoke them wasn't guessing. They knew. Ethan's jaw tightened. He scanned the area, suddenly aware that the rules had shifted. This was no longer a search for a buried anomaly. This was a hunt for a man. The German shepherd stiffened, ears forward, a low sound rumbling deep in his chest. Not aggression, but warning. Ethan exhaled slowly, forcing his pulse to steady. "All right," he murmured. "Now we're talking." Above them, the hunters adjusted their formation, spreading out, eyes scanning not the ground but the spaces between cover. The city remained blindingly bright, indifferent to the quiet escalation unfolding beneath its streets. And somewhere in the shadows between concrete and snow, the ghost they had smelled was already moving again. The city above was still blindingly bright, snow reflecting winter sun with a cruelty that made every shadow feel exposed. But down in the seams between concrete walls, the light fractured into sharp angles and hard contrasts. Ethan moved through that fractured world with deliberate calm, his breath measured, his steps placed where echoes died quickly. The hunters had adjusted their pattern after the generator went dark, spreading wider, scanning higher, expecting retaliation. That expectation was the lever he needed. He did not aim to kill. Killing would scatter them. He needed them to compress. The first trap was sound. Ethan routed a portable strobe emitter Leo had hidden behind a rusted vent cover, set it to pulse at an irregular rhythm that mimicked movement. When it flashed, the light ricocheted off ice-slick concrete, turning the alley mouths into white mouths opening and closing. Two mercenaries peeled off to investigate, rifles up, bodies tense. Ethan waited until they were almost abreast of a narrow service lane, then triggered the second layer, a concussive thumper buried beneath compacted snow. It was non-lethal by design, a deep percussive boom that knocked balance loose and stole breath. The men went down hard, swearing, disoriented, vision swimming. Ethan was already gone. He moved like a rumor, appearing where the terrain bent toward concealment. Nets deployed next, weighted polymer filaments fired from a hidden launcher that blossomed midair and dropped with sudden gravity. Another pair went down, tangled and furious, cutting themselves free with knives. The alley geometry did the rest, channeling movement, narrowing options. The remaining three, clearly the leaders, retreated together, backs to a pair of old concrete retaining walls that formed a throat in the city's bones. Ethan let them think they'd found shelter. The German shepherd ghosted along a parallel route, dark sable coat absorbing light, black overlay breaking his outline, against shadowed masonry. Up close, the dog looked older than his speed suggested. His muzzle showed fine lines etched by years, and his amber eyes held a steadiness that came only from experience. 10 years old, perhaps 11, his joints stiffened by cold but his focus unbroken. He moved with the discipline of a K9 who had learned when to wait and when to strike, not from obedience alone, but from trust. Ethan took position on a low ledge, rifle supported, angle clean. He didn't announce himself. He never did. The leader stepped forward first, shoulders squared, helmet lifted. Elias Thorne looked exactly like the kind of man Ethan had learned to fear in conference rooms more than on battlefields. Late 40s, tall, lean, the kind of lean that came from restraint rather than hunger. His face was angular, cheeks sharp, mouth thin and precise. A close-trimmed beard traced his jawline with deliberate neatness, salt beginning to creep into the dark. His eyes were pale and cold, calculating in a way that suggested he had learned to separate people from outcomes a long time ago. "Ethan Carter," Elias said, voice carrying without effort. He smiled, a small cut of expression, surgical. "You always did prefer the dramatic entrances." Ethan kept the rifle steady. "You brought 8 men and a toolbox to dig up a city," he said. "Seems dramatic enough." Elias chuckled softly. "You think this is about you?" He glanced at the trapped men behind him with mild irritation, then back up. "Leo wasn't a hero. He was a liability. We don't sacrifice assets, we handle them." The word landed heavier than any insult. Handle. As if a life were a malfunction. Ethan felt the old heat flare, but he kept his voice level. "You set him up." Elias spread his hands, palms out, an old intelligence officer's gesture of false candor. "We put him where he could do the least damage. He insisted on doing the rest himself." The memory snapped into focus. Leo's last message, the exhaustion, the certainty. Ethan's jaw hardened. You don't get to decide what he was. Elias's smile sharpened. He raised a hand, fingers twitching. 2 of his men lifted their rifles in unison. Ethan fired. The shot was precise, controlled, a demonstration rather than an execution. The round struck Elias's weapon at the receiver, metal screaming as it shattered. The rifle tore free of Elias's grip and clattered uselessly across the concrete. The echo of the impact rang through the alley like a verdict. Elias stared at his empty hands, then looked up slowly, eyes alight with something like delight. "Still the shield," he said, always protecting the idea of rules. Before his men could react, the German shepherd launched from the side passage with explosive speed. He didn't go for the throat. He didn't tear. He hit Elias center mass, shoulder and chest, a battering ram of controlled force. They went down together. The dog rolled through the impact, jaws clamping onto Elias's forearm with crushing pressure, locking the joint without breaking skin. It was textbook K9 control, pain calibrated to compliance. Elias cried out, more in shock than agony. His other hand scrabbled for a knife, fingers brushing the grip before Ethan was there, boot pinning the wrist, rifle muzzle steady inches from Elias's face. "Don't," Ethan said quietly. The remaining two mercenaries froze, rifles hovering, eyes darting between the man on the ground and the dog holding him fast. The German shepherd's growl was low and constant, not rage, but instruction. Ethan cuffed Elias with a zip restraint, swift and practiced, then stepped back. The dog released on command and repositioned, body between Ethan and the others, stance firm, eyes unblinking. Elias laughed once, breathless. "You always bring the right friends," he said, glancing at the dog. "Living keys. That's clever." Ethan ignored him. His auswa. Attention flicked to the microfeed still running in his peripheral display. The bunker's exterior cameras had come alive, Leo's systems waking in layers now that Ethan had learned the language. On the screen, another team moved with purposeful speed toward the main access point. Drills were out, core bits engaged, the snow plume spiraled as metal bit into reinforced concrete. "Ethan," Elias said, voice softer now, almost companionable. "They're not going to stop, even if you kill me." Ethan met his gaze. "I don't need to kill you." He dragged Elias to his feet and secured him against a post, then turned back to the screen. The drilling intensified, vibration readings spiking. The German shepherd moved closer, shoulder brushing Ethan's leg, a silent check-in. Ethan rested a hand briefly on the dog's head, feeling the warmth beneath the thick fur, the steady pulse. "Good boy," he murmured, not as praise, but as thanks. The camera feed zoomed, the tut-tut. Drill's progress meter ticked upward. If the main door was breached, the bunker's advantages collapsed. Leo had built for secrecy, not siege. Ethan's mind raced through options. He could retreat, seal internal bulkheads, disappear deeper. He could escalate, draw the teams away. None were clean, none were safe. Elias watched him with keen interest. "What will it be, Shield?" he asked. "Run and save the evidence, or stay and save the dog?" Ethan turned, eyes hard. "You don't get to talk about him." The German shepherd's ears pricked at the rising pitch of the drill. He looked toward the screen, then back to Ethan, understanding without words. The living key, the keeper of paths and triggers, the one who knew what humans could not. Ethan exhaled, steadying. The city's brightness felt far away now, a lie told by sun on snow. Down here, truth was weight and time. "All right," he said to the dog, voice low and resolute. "We do it your way." Above them, the drill bit screamed, biting closer to the heart of the bunker. On the screen, the progress bar crossed another mark. If the door was exposed, everything would come down. Secrets, systems, the thin margin that kept them alive. Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle, eyes never leaving the feed. The trap had worked. The leader was captured. But the hunt was not over. It was about to become a siege. The bunker shuddered as the drill bit above found purchase again, a grinding vibration that rattled the light panels and sent a soft snowfall of dust drifting from seams that had not moved in decades. Ethan hauled Elias Thorne through the access corridor with efficient brutality, every step measured, every corner cleared. Elias's boots scraped against the composite floor, his breath sharp and uneven, the earlier confidence drained into a tight, watchful silence. Ethan sealed the inner bulkhead behind them, the door locking with a layered series of metallic clicks that felt like a countdown. The German shepherd trotted at Ethan's heel, posture alert, dark sable coat bristling with purpose. The dog's amber eyes flicked between Ethan and the captive, never lingering, never doubting. Age showed in the careful way he turned, in the economy of motion, but not in resolve. He was here to keep the path open, to keep the promise. Ethan strapped Elias into a restraint chair bolted to the wall opposite the command console. Elias watched the process with professional interest, pale eyes following each movement. cataloging weaknesses out of habit. His face, sharp and composed, had lost its smile, replaced by something colder, curiosity edged with calculation. "You're wasting time," Elias said, voice calm despite the restraints. "You know what opening Valhalla costs." Ethan didn't answer. He slid into the chair at the console and brought the main monitor to life. The directory tree bloomed across the screen, clean and unforgiving. Valhalla sat at the center, locked behind a layered encryption scheme that pulsed faintly, like a living thing. Beneath it, a warning scrolled in restrained gray text. "Archival key required. Remote request will be logged." A trap. Leo had said as much. To open Valhalla fully meant calling out into a system that never truly slept. Ethan's fingers hovered above the keyboard. He closed his eyes for a breath and let the old habits take over. The mental checklists, the practiced calm that had carried him through rooms filled with smoke, and worse. He began erecting a shell of obfuscation, routing paths through dormant municipal relays, piggybacking on outdated maintenance nodes, bouncing the request across jurisdictions that argued with each other more than they cooperated. It wouldn't make him invisible. It would make him late to be understood. The German shepherd moved closer, positioning himself between Ethan and Elias. He sat, spine straight, eyes forward, the embodiment of watchfulness. The drill screamed above them, closer now. Another tremor shook loose a ribbon of dust that spiraled down like inverted snow. "Proceed," Ethan whispered. He sent the request. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. The bunker's hum deepened, a subsonic vibration that made the air feel thicker. Then a single line of text appeared. "Archival key received. Authenticating." Elias exhaled a quiet laugh. "There it is," he said. "The bell you can't unring." The screen flashed. Valhalla opened. What spilled out was not a story but a ledger of betrayal. Orders stamped and countersigned. Threat assessments quietly altered. Mission briefs stripped of warnings. Audio files layered with the voices of men who spoke about casualty ratios as if they were margins. Financial transfers mapped cleanly across shell companies and jurisdictions, the money's path as clear as a blood trail. Satellite imagery marked with timestamps that aligned too perfectly with ambushes Ethan remembered by smell and sound. Ethan copied everything to a hardened data chip, hands steady despite the tremors. The bunker shook again as the drill bit chewed closer to the outer shell, dust falling heavier now, the lights flickering as if the facility itself were bracing. The German shepherd stood, shoulder pressed against Ethan's thigh, amber eyes fixed on the screen as if guarding more than data, guarding a man's last words. Guarding Leo. Ethan finished the transfer and encrypted the chip with a layered cipher keyed to a pattern only he would recognize. He pocketed it and pulled up a secure comms window. He needed someone who could carry this fire into daylight without being burned by it. Someone stubborn enough to keep walking when threatened. Sarah Miller. Her profile loaded from an independent journalist database Leo had curated years earlier. Sarah was in her late 30s, tall and lean, posture straight as if the world had taught her to expect a shove. Her hair was dark brown, worn in a practical cut that brushed her shoulders when she forgot to trim it, usually tied back when she worked. Her skin carried the faint weathering of long days and sleepless nights, a pale canvas that flushed easily under pressure. Her eyes, hazel, sharp, had the habit of narrowing not in fear but in focus. She was known for 2 things, refusing to take money and refusing to back down. Years ago, a corporate lawsuit had always tried to bury her after she exposed a procurement scam. She had won, barely, and the experience had sanded away any remaining softness. Ethan typed quickly, keeping the message spare. Proof of treason, full chain, names, orders, coordinates for a dead drop. He attached nothing yet. Trust had to be earned even now. He sent it. The reply came faster than he expected. 1 line. No greeting, no preamble. They're already watching me. The lights flickered hard enough to dim, the bunker's hum, stuttering like a heart skipping a beat. On the auxiliary display, network activity spiked, a ripple through the obfuscation shell Ethan had built. Someone had brushed the edges, testing, listening. Elias smiled again, thin and satisfied. "Told you," he said softly. "Wars don't start when bullets fly. They start when secrets breathe." Ethan stood. He met Elias's gaze without heat. This one ends when the truth sees daylight. Another violent tremor ran through the floor. The Itzadiyah. Drill's pitch changed, closer still. The German shepherd lifted his head and let out a low, steady sound. Not fear, not anger. A signal. Ethan placed a hand on the dog's neck, feeling the solid warmth beneath the thick coat. Almost, he murmured. Just a little longer. On the screen, Valhalla's files glowed, complete and undeniable. Outside, the city remained bright and unaware, snow flashing under sun like a lie told convincingly. Inside, the bunker braced as power surged and systems strained. Ethan looked once more at Sarah's message, then at the feed showing the drill biting down, and finally at the dog who had led him here. The war had begun the moment Valhalla opened. The next move would decide whether it ended in silence or light. The lights flickered again, and this time they did not immediately steady. The night never truly went dark in Denver. Snow caught and scattered the moonlight, street lamps haloed the alleys, and the city glowed with a cold, unwavering clarity. When the first sirens cut through the air, their sound did not feel sudden. It felt inevitable, like an answer that had taken its time. Ethan watched the approach on the bunker's exterior feeds as the convoy fanned out with professional restraint. Federal vehicles first, unmarked SUVs with clean lines and dark glass, followed by local police units taking positions that sealed the perimeter without spectacle. No shouting, no panic, just the precise choreography of people who had been given something solid to act upon. Proof changes everything. It turns guesses into orders. Elias Thorne saw it too. The confidence he had worn like a tailored suit finally slipped, leaving behind a naked calculation that could not find an exit. He sat restrained, shoulders tight, jaw set, eyes flicking from screen to screen for the first time since Ethan had met him. Elias said nothing. The German shepherd stood at Ethan's side, body aligned with the screens, ears forward. Under the steady lights, his dark sable coat looked almost black, the tan of his legs muted by shadow. He was old enough now that the joints in his shoulders shifted with care, but his stance was uncompromised. This was the end of the watch, and he intended to see it through. On the main feed, agents converged on the drilling team as the bit screamed and then stalled, power cut cleanly from above. Hands went up, rifles were lowered. The men who had come to peel the city open were placed face down in snow bright enough to erase bravado. When Elias was pulled to his feet and led away, he looked back once, eyes meeting Ethan's through the lens. There was no plea there. Only the quiet fury of a man whose story had ended somewhere he could not control. Ethan shut the feeds down and let the bunker breathe again. The hum steadied. The lights stopped flickering. He stood there for a moment longer than necessary, feeling the place settle, the way a ship does after a storm. He had built nothing here, but he understood it now, and understanding he had learned carried its own responsibility. Sarah Miller's article broke before dawn. Ethan watched the headlines roll across a secure display as snow continued to fall outside, the city waking to a truth it had not expected. Sarah's writing was lean and relentless. She did not embellish. She did not soften. She laid out timelines and transfers, quoted voices that spoke too casually about lives, and named names with the precision of someone who had spent years learning where to place a blade so it could not be dismissed as an accident. Photos followed, documents, links, a chain reaction ignited. Apex collapsed in public view. Executives resigned, then were escorted out. Contracts froze. Hearings were announced. The narrative shifted, not toward revenge, but toward accountability. And at the center of it, framed not as myth but as fact, was Leo Grant, no longer a liability, no longer a footnote, a man who had died to open a lock no one else could. Ethan did not celebrate. He sat, shoulders easing for the first time in years, and watched the truth do what it did best when given room: move. When the messages stopped coming and the feeds quieted, Ethan stood and began the last task. Leo had planned this too, of course. The scuttling protocol lived deep in the system, not as an explosion, but as a withdrawal. Doors sealed, data wiped to white noise, power stepped down in deliberate stages. The bunker would not die loudly, it would sleep. He walked the corridors one final time. The bunk, still perfectly made. The kitchenette, unused. The medical bay, untouched. He paused at the command chair and rested a hand on the worn padding, acknowledging the man who had sat there first. Then he turned away and keyed the final sequence, the German shepherd. Followed him without prompting, gait measured, eyes calm. At the exit, Ethan clipped a simple leather leash onto the paracord collar, not as restraint, but as a courtesy to the world above. Together they ascended, the door sealing behind them with a sound that felt like a held breath, finally released. Deep within the earth, supports shifted and locked. Snow slid, stones settled. The city reclaimed its silence. Morning came clean. The sky over Denver was a pale, honest blue, the kind that made promises without guaranteeing comfort. Snow lay bright and unbroken along the streets. A white road rolled out for anyone willing to take it. Ethan loaded the last of his few belongings into the bed of an old pickup that had seen better decades and worse roads. The engine turned over with a familiar, patient rattle. He took a moment before getting in. He looked at the city, at the warehouses, the rail lines, the places where secrets had been kept and found, and then at the dog waiting by the passenger door. The German shepherd climbed in with a practiced hop, settling onto the seat, head out the open window, ears lifting into the cold wind. There was joy there, uncomplicated and earned, and it tugged at something in Ethan's chest he had thought was gone for good. They pulled away as the sun crested the buildings, light spilling across snow like a benediction. Traffic was thin. The road opened. Ethan felt the tension drain from his hands as the city fell behind them. He wasn't thinking about money or headlines. He wasn't even thinking about what came next. He was present in a way he had not been since before the night everything broke. At a stoplight, the dog turned his head and looked at him, amber eyes soft now, unguarded. Ethan laughed, quiet, surprised by the sound, and shook his head. It wasn't victory that made him smile. It was the simple truth that he was not alone, that a promise had been kept, that the road ahead belonged to them. The light changed. The truck rolled forward. Snow flashed and faded beneath the tires as two old soldiers, one on 4 legs, one on 2, headed east into a morning bright enough to start again. Sometimes the miracle doesn't arrive with thunder or fire from the sky. Sometimes it comes quietly, on 4 tired legs through snow and darkness, at the exact moment a soul is ready to give up. Some call it coincidence, others call it instinct, but for those who have walked through loss, through guilt, through nights that feel endless, it's hard not to see the hand of God at work. Maybe God didn't remove the storm from Ethan's path. Instead, he sent guidance through the storm, a loyal companion, a second chance, a reminder that no promise made in love is ever truly forgotten. And maybe that's how grace works in our daily lives too. Not by making life easy, but by giving us just enough light to take the next step. If you're watching this and carrying your own quiet burden, remember this: you are not alone, even when it feels that way. Help can come from places you never expect. At times you think it's already too late. Hold on. Keep walking. Trust that God sees you. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We read every one. And if stories of faith, loyalty, courage, and second chances speak to you, subscribe to the channel so we can continue this journey together. May God bless you, protect you, and guide you through every storm you face. Amen.